My name is Avery Cole. I'm 40 years old, and last Christmas, my husband stood in a ballroom full of his coworkers, lifted his whiskey glass, and said, "Stop acting like you own me." The room erupted 19 seconds of laughter that sliced through my chest like glass. I just smiled, because what they didn't know was that while they laughed, I was already counting down to the moment every lock in his life would change. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by someone who swore they loved you. This story isn't just about heartbreak. It's about what happens when a woman stops asking for respect and starts taking it back, lock by lock. I grew up in Tacoma, in a house that smelled like sawdust and black coffee. My father, Samuel Cole, was a construction foreman who believed walls should be straight, roofs should never leak, and people should keep their word. My mother left when I was 9. She said she was going to find herself, but what she really found was another man 2 states away. From that day on, it was just Dad and me, and the echo of her absence that shaped every corner of our house. Dad worked long hours, but every night, he'd bring home blueprints and spread them across our kitchen table. "Measure twice, cut once," he'd always say, his calloused fingers tracing lines like they were scripture. I didn't know it then, but that phrase would become my entire philosophy. When other kids were watching cartoons, I was learning how to calculate square footage and cost per unit. By the time I was 17, I could read architectural drawings better than most interns in his office. "You've got my brain," Dad used to say, pride softening his gravelly voice. "But don't ever let anyone own it." I didn't know he was warning me about my future husband. After college, an MBA from Northwestern on full scholarship, I landed a job at McKinsey. My coworkers called me the spreadsheet whisperer. I liked solving impossible problems, finding patterns others missed, but I also liked control. Control made me feel safe, like the walls Dad built. That's when I met Ethan Ward. He was charming in the way dangerous men often are, confident, magnetic, the kind of guy who made every room turn toward him without understanding why. We met at a corporate conference in Chicago. He spilled coffee on my presentation binder, and instead of apologizing, he smiled and said, "Guess I owe you dinner." I should have said no. But I didn't. Ethan made me feel seen, or at least, what I thought was seen. He asked questions about my work, my goals, my father. He laughed at my dry jokes. He had that effortless charm that felt like sunlight after a long winter. Back then, I didn't realize charm can also burn. We married 2 years later. I was 26. He was 27, newly admitted to Wharton's MBA program. He said it was his dream. I said I'd help, so I paid his tuition with my consulting bonuses and the down payment my father had saved for my first house. "It's an investment in our future," Ethan said. I believed him. When Dad passed away the year Ethan graduated, I inherited the downtown condo, a glass and steel sanctuary on the 19th floor overlooking Elliott Bay. The building shimmered with that quiet kind of wealth you can't fake. Dad had built half of it himself. I remember standing there the first night after his funeral, the city lights reflecting in the windows, whispering, "I'll make you proud." Ethan called it our home, but the deed was in my name. It was funded entirely by Dad's trust, a trust with strict conditions. The clause was clear: no high-risk investments, no mortgaging the property, only I had access. Ethan didn't like that. "You don't trust me?" he'd ask, voice soft, hands sliding around my waist. "It's just paperwork. Avenue. We're married. What's mine is yours." Except it wasn't. I started my own consulting firm, Cole Strategies, out of that apartment. Long nights at the kitchen island, laptop open, city lights flickering off my wine glass. I built it from scratch, one client at a time, until I was making more than I ever did at McKinsey. Ethan's career grew too. Helix One, a promising biotech company, where he climbed fast. By year 8 of our marriage, he was the youngest VP in their history. We looked like success, the perfect couple in LinkedIn photos and holiday newsletters. What no one saw were the fractures underneath the tiny, hairline cracks that spread every time Ethan made a decision for me and called it ours. It started small. He'd forget to mention business trips that fell on our anniversary. He'd joke in front of friends about how Avery's the boss at home. He'd roll his eyes when I talked about my clients, as if my achievements were cute little hobbies. Then came the Tuesday meetings. Every Tuesday around 1 p.m., Ethan would text me, "Investor lunch, don't wait for me." For months, I didn't think twice. Until Louis, our building concierge, mentioned offhandedly one evening, "Your husband's guests sure are punctual on Tuesdays." "Guests?" I asked. He hesitated. "Just a woman, usually around 1, blonde, business casual, leaves by 3. I remember the metallic taste in my mouth as I thanked him and pretended not to care. That night, I stared at the ceiling, watching headlights crawl across the walls, telling myself there had to be another explanation. I didn't know it then, but those Tuesdays would become evidence recorded in Louis's handwritten logbook, confirmed later by security footage, and burned into the timeline of my undoing. Still, I stayed. I always stayed. Because control, I thought, meant endurance. Because I believed I could fix anything with enough patience and precision. But I was wrong. And it all began to unravel one December morning when a simple email about a company Christmas party landed in my inbox with a note from Ethan. "Dress code, oxblood. You'll look stunning." I didn't realize he'd sent the same message to someone else. I didn't know it then, but that single color would become my battle flag. The week before the Christmas party, Seattle was soaked in rain, the kind that made the sky look bruised. I worked from the apartment, finalizing a client's end-of-year strategy deck, while Ethan stayed late at Helix One, prepping for Q1 budgets. That phrase had started to mean nothing. My gut had learned the difference between work and deceit, but my head was still writing formulas for forgiveness. On Tuesday, I heard the familiar sound of the service elevator stopping on our floor. The soft chime, the echo of heels, the brief murmur of Louis greeting someone. 2 hours later, the same chime again, leaving in silence. My hands shook so hard I almost spilled coffee over my keyboard. I remember glancing at the clock 3:07 p.m. and thinking, even his lies are scheduled. That night, I asked, "How was the investor meeting?" He didn't look up from his phone. "Productive." "Why?" "Because you smell like Chanel, no." 5, I said. He laughed, the kind of laugh that feels like a slap. "You're getting paranoid, Avenue. That's what stress does to people who overthink." I swallowed the words burning at the back of my throat. He kissed my forehead like a parent soothing a child, then went to shower. The water drowned out my tears. 2 days later, Miriam Gold knocked on my door. I'd only spoken to her twice, the retired federal judge across the hall, silver hair in a perfect twist, always carrying the New York Times under her arm. She said she'd noticed someone visiting while I was out and wanted to make sure everything was all right. Her tone was polite, but her eyes were courtroom sharp. "Miriam, I'm fine," I said. "I believe you," she replied, "but just in case, I keep records of everything that happens on this floor. Old habit." She smiled, handed me a card, and left. On it, she'd written in careful cursive, "For when you decide enough is enough." I tucked it into a drawer and told myself I'd never need it. By mid-December, Ethan started pressuring me about Athena Coin, the crypto startup he and his friend Miles were building. He said it was the next frontier, that we should invest from my father's trust. "The clause forbids that kind of risk," I reminded him. He sighed dramatically. "That clause is ancient. It's holding us back, or protecting us." He set his glass down a little too hard. "God, you sound just like your father. Controlling. Always afraid to take chances." It wasn't the first time he'd compared me to Dad, but it was the first time it hurt differently because I realized I missed being compared to someone who had integrity. I didn't know that Miles had already been investigated twice for fraud. I didn't know that Helix One's internal network held traces of their side project, disguised under a different name. But Noah did. Noah Park, the head of IT, had been my friend since business school. We'd lost touch until one night he texted, "Avery, check your inbox. It's about Ethan." Attached was a security log, keycard entries, timestamps, elevator footage snippets. Tuesday after Tuesday. The same 1 p.m. Entry for Jenna Hale, Helix One's accountant. And the same 1:12 p.m. Entry for Ethan. 90 minutes apart from the next exit. Noah wrote, "I thought you should see this before HR does." My chest felt hollow. I stared at those numbers until they blurred. 112, 242, 19, 246, each pair a wound shaped like time. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I poured a glass of whiskey, sat on the balcony, and listened to the rain hitting the glass railing. Below, the city glowed cold and indifferent. When I finally texted back, I wrote only, "Thank you, don't delete anything." That night, I opened Miriam's card again. For when you decide, enough is enough. I laid it next to Louis's latest note he'd slipped under my door. Tuesday again. Same woman. 2 witnesses. 2 timelines. 2 truths colliding. Still, I waited. I told myself I needed one more piece, one final confirmation. That piece came wrapped in velvet and deceit. On December 23rd, Ethan handed me a small box. "For you," he said. Inside were diamond earrings. Beautiful, familiar. "They're lovely," I said. "Your mother will love them." He blinked. "They're for you." My heart stuttered. I'd seen those exact earrings before on Jenna's ears during Helix One's Thanksgiving gala. The cut, the setting, even the tiny scratch on the clasp. I met his eyes and smiled. "You're right, they're perfect." That was the moment I stopped being the wife trying to understand and became the strategist taking notes. The Christmas party arrived 1 week later. I put on the oxblood dress he'd requested, the same shade he'd told someone else to wear. The air outside smelled of pine and wet concrete as the driver opened my door at the Fairmont. Inside, the ballroom glimmered with chandeliers and champagne laughter. I walked in beside Ethan, his hand on my lower back like a brand. I could feel every eye on us, the power couple from the 19th floor. The music swelled, glasses clinked, and somewhere near the bar, Jenna turned. Her own dress identical to mine, but shorter, bolder. Our eyes met across the crowd, hers wide with guilt, mine steady as glass. I didn't cause a scene. I just noted the symmetry. When Ethan clinked his glass later that night and delivered his infamous line, I didn't cry. I counted. 1 second, 2, 3, 19. And in those 19 seconds, something inside me locked into place. I didn't know it yet, but I had already started building the blueprint for his downfall, one that would be measured, precise, and impossible to undo. Measure twice, cut once. Dad's voice whispered through the noise, and this time, I intended to cut deep. The morning after the party, the apartment felt like a crime scene where the body was my pride. The oxblood dress hung over the chair, the fabric still carrying the faint scent of champagne and humiliation. Ethan's words echoed through my skull. "Stop acting like you own me." He was still asleep, sprawled across the bed like a man without conscience. I stood in the kitchen making his usual coffee, 2 sugars, no cream, my hands steady only because my rage had reached a surgical level of calm. I'd already texted the locksmith. I'd already called the divorce attorney. All that was left was execution. When he walked out, rubbing sleep from his eyes, I smiled like I always did. "Coffee's on the counter," he grunted, scrolling through his phone. "Brad's sending over that Athena paperwork today. Need your signature before 5. "Of course," I said lightly. "I'll review it." He looked up, suspicious. "Don't start with your control issues." Avenue Miles went to Wharton. "He knows what he's doing." "So did the guys at Enron," I said. He froze, then laughed like it was a joke. But I saw the muscle twitch in his jaw. That was my confirmation he was nervous. He should be. That day, I called Camila Reyes, a divorce attorney I'd met years ago at a women's leadership event. Her reputation was legend. She didn't just win cases, she dismantled opponents. "I'm ready," I said. Her voice was calm, precise. "Then we do this my way. Quietly. Legally. Brutally." By noon, the locksmith, Diana, was at my door, humming as she replaced the lock with a military-grade cylinder. Louis helped carry the toolbox. When the click echoed through the hallway, it sounded final. "You'll sleep better," Diana said, handing me the new keys. "I already do," I replied. That evening, I sat at my laptop and composed the email. "Transparency and truth, a necessary update." I attached 2 videos, Ethan's public outburst at the Fairmont and the internal footage Noah had retrieved of his Tuesday visits. I added the expense logs proving he'd billed our Paris anniversary as a client trip. The recipient list was surgical. Helix One's HR, the board of directors, Vivian, and Ethan himself. Scheduled send, 2:30 a.m. Then, I waited. At 2:23 a.m., the elevator dinged. Through the peephole, I saw him, disheveled, drunk, fumbling with his key. The click of metal against the new lock was almost poetic. Ruby. He slurred my name once, twice, then louder. Avery. What the hell? I said nothing. Across the hall, Miriam opened her door, wearing a silk robe and holding a cup of tea. Mr. Ward, she said coolly. Keys tend not to work when one no longer resides somewhere. He blinked, confused, then angry. Who the hell are you? Your wife's neighbor, she said, pausing just long enough for the word wife to sting. And a retired federal judge, so I suggest you stop pounding before I call security. He backed off, muttering threats that dissolved into the hallway air. At 2:30 a.m., right on cue, the email launched. My phone lit up with confirmations. Ethan's lit up too. I saw the glow on his face through the peephole, the horror dawning as notification after notification stacked up. His boss, his mother, HR. The walls of his perfect image collapsing in real time. He pounded on the door again, shouting, "You'll regret this." Inside, I whispered, "You already do." The next morning, Noah texted. Helix One opened an internal review. They're freezing his access. And Vivian, his mother, called. I expected fury. Instead, her voice cracked. I saw the video, Avery. I'm ashamed. He's his father's son. That stopped me. Excuse me? She exhaled shakily. His father did the same thing to me. Affairs, lies, debts. I thought Ethan would be better. I was wrong. For the first time in 14 years, Vivian Ward sounded human. I'll send you something, she whispered. A file Ethan doesn't know I have. The file arrived the next day. A scanned letter of credit Ethan had opened with Miles, using my trust as collateral. The document alone could bury him. That was when I realized. Ethan wasn't just unfaithful, he was criminal. And he'd built his entire empire on my father's money. By the end of that week, the storm had only just started to form around Ethan, and I was the one controlling the forecast. Helix One's HR called me for clarification about the video. I played innocent, as though I'd been too embarrassed to report it earlier. He's under a lot of pressure, I said sweetly. I just wanted people to see the context. The woman on the other end of the line hesitated before saying, There's more than context, Mrs. Ward. There's misconduct. By Friday morning, Ethan's work badge stopped granting him access to the executive floor. He stormed home midday, the slam of the door shaking the frames on the hallway wall. What the hell did you do? He demanded. Nothing you didn't hand me yourself, I said quietly. He laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. You think you're clever, Avery? You just ruined both of us. No, Ethan. I just stopped letting you ruin me. He spent that night on the couch, muttering into his phone, calling Miles and Brad like they were lifelines instead of co-conspirators. I caught enough to hear. They can't trace it back to us, right? That was all I needed. I texted Noah. Pull everything you can on Athena Coin and Miles Benton. 2 days later, a file appeared in my inbox encrypted, labeled, For Camila. It contained copies of server logs, emails, and an internal audit memo. Helix One had buried 6 months ago. Potential misuse of company resources for external cryptocurrency project. The name Athena Coin was highlighted in red. I forwarded it to Camila. She called me within minutes. He's cooked, she said. You've got fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and trust violation. You don't even need divorce court, you've got an indictment waiting to happen. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Then let's build the case. That Sunday, Vivian showed up at my apartment unannounced. She looked smaller, frailer, her pearls askew, lipstick imperfect. I thought I'd be angry at you, she said, but I'm angry at myself. She placed an envelope on the counter. Inside was the original trust document, notarized, untouched. "He tried to have this altered," she said softly. I stopped it. "He doesn't know I know." I met her eyes. "Why help me now?" "Because the woman I was once would have wished someone had helped her too." Her words hit deeper than I expected. For a brief second, we were two women tied together by the same mistake, believing a man's ambition was a promise, not a threat. 2 days later, the investigation at Helix One leaked to the press. Ethan tried to spin it, calling journalists from his personal email, claiming he was the victim of a vindictive spouse. Unfortunately for him, the public tends to side with the one holding the receipts. The first twist came that afternoon when Jenna Hale, yes, the woman in the oxblood dress, emailed me directly. The subject line read, "I'm sorry, and I can prove it." We met at a quiet cafe near the waterfront. She looked exhausted, her mascara smudged, hands trembling. "He told me you were already separated," she said, "that you refused to sign divorce papers, that you were vindictive." She slid a flash drive across the table. "He promised me a promotion if I helped move the funds through the Athena account." I recorded everything. The audio was damning. Ethan's voice, smooth and familiar, saying, "Once we sell the condo, we're clear. That inheritance was never hers anyway." I didn't react. I'd stopped reacting. I just said, "Thank you," and left her sitting there in her guilt. That night, Tyler, my brother, called from the storage unit. "Avery, you'll want to see this." He'd found a stack of bank statements tucked inside Ethan's golf bag. Small withdrawals, every few weeks, always under 1,000. Over 3 years, nearly $40,000 missing from our joint account. "Looks like a personal drip feed," Tyler said. "Smart, but not smart enough." "Label the box," I told him. "Evidence financial." By the time February rolled around, Camila had built a legal war chest. Noah's data formed the skeleton. Vivian's trust file was the muscle. Jenna's recording the heart. Every piece was airtight, each timeline precise down to the minute. Then came the final confirmation that made everything click. Noah sent one more file late one night. Expense reports from Helix One's Paris trip 2 years ago, our anniversary vacation. Ethan had listed it as client engagement, paid entirely by the company. The same night, he billed the dinner at the Eiffel Tower. His phone logs showed a message to Jenna. "Wish you were here instead." I stared at the screen until the timestamp blurred. That was the moment I stopped seeing him as my husband. He was a case study now, a live example of how greed corrodes love. Camila's voice cut through my thoughts when I called her. "We're ready." "But how far do you want to go?" "All the way," I said. "He built everything on lies. I'll make sure he drowns in the truth." The blueprint was finished. Every measurement precise, every angle calculated. All that was left was to set it in motion. And the next time Ethan tried to stand in a room full of people, pretending to own me, he'd find out exactly how much control I still had. I waited until he was too drunk to be suspicious. That was the first rule: strike when the target is off balance, when ego has drunk its own armor thin. At 2:15 a.m., I sat on the hallway carpet with my back to the door, the new keys heavy in my palm like a verdict. The apartment behind me was dark. The city beyond our windows was a smear of sodium yellow and harbor lights. My phone showed the scheduled email, 2 confirmations, sent to board, sent to HR. I breathed in the cold hall air and tasted iron and old warning. At 2:23 a.m., the elevator sang and his silhouette slid into frame. He moved like a man who owns the lobby, arms out, chin up, confidence lubricated by whiskey. His key fumbled. He tried again. The click of metal on metal sounded wrong to him, then to me, then to everything that had ever been ordinary between us. He pounded once, twice. The sound ricocheted off the framed prints, loud as accusation. He swore. He shouted my name. Miriam opened her door like a judge rising to address the court. Her robe caught the light, her hair a wire of moonlight. "Mr. Ward," she said, with the slow civility of a gavel, "this is not amusing." He swore again. He beat on the door with both fists until his knuckles flashed red. I heard the lobby camera ping as people started to wake, as phones lit up with a single word, "Received." When the first notification popped on his screen, he muttered and cursed. Then the next. Then the next. The glow from his phone painted his face the color of surrender. HR, bored, Vivian. Noah's message. Internal review opened. Access frozen. Louis slid into the hallway, his breath fogging in the cold, his eyes solemn beneath the cap he always tilted back. He had his little notebook under his arm, the one he'd used to log every Tuesday. He pulled out his phone and started recording without a word. The angle was perfect. He banged the door one last time, and then, because he was a man who had always expected doors to open for him, he dropped to his knees and began to plead. Avery, come on, let's talk. His voice lost its bark and became a thin animal sound. I stood in the dark and listened to a man barter for the thing he had already thrown away. Outside, the city hummed on. Inside the hallway, a dozen small lights blinked like tiny witness candles. Miriam recited a line that echoed my own planning. Pound all you like, Mr. Ward. Words and fists look awful on camera. He looked up at the camera and froze as if caught mid-crime. Someone laughed. An ugly, brittle sound from the corridor. He slumped against the door, and the sob that escaped him wasn't quite a man's or quite a child's. 2 weeks later, at the rooftop party, the second act unfolded like a carefully timed sting. The sky was hard and cold. Twinkling lights made the city look like someone had shaken a jewelry box over the darkness. I chose red that night not for revenge, but for reclamation. The dress fit like armor. I walked into the crowd and felt the air tilt. Conversations paused with the polite noise of simpering interest. Then he arrived, triumphant, hand on a woman's waist, his smile pasted on. He expected me to flinch. He expected the room to slide toward him like the audience at his one-man show. Instead, the room rearranged itself into a line between him and me. People who had once laughed formed little islands of turned backs. The DJ lowered the music. The rooftop manager, a man I barely knew, stepped forward with the kind of calm that ends fights. Sir, you're not on the resident list, he said, and it landed like paper between us. Miriam lifted her glass and made a toast. The words were simple and surgical. To locks physical and mental. To those brave enough to change them. Applause rippled, not cruel, but cleansing. I felt the sound as a tide lifting me up and carrying away the last of shame. Ethan's face peeled from color to gray to the pale of someone whose map had been erased. He tried to speak. No one turned. He shuffled toward the exit, shoulders folding as people parted around him like a current avoids a rock. He left under the gaze of 60 people and the weight of his own choices. I watched him go and felt nothing like triumph. I felt the hollow, clean thing that comes after a long, slow unmasking. Relief. I folded my hands around my champagne and let the bubbles carry the tremor out of my fingers. The locks had done more than keep him out of a door. They had opened the air around me and let truth in. They thought they'd humiliated me that night with 19 seconds of laughter. What they didn't know was those seconds had become my blueprint. The locks clicked shut, and something inside me clicked open. After the rooftop night, silence became my favorite sound. It filled the apartment like fresh air after a storm. Ethan's things were gone, each box labeled and stacked in storage like evidence, waiting for a trial that might never come. But his shadow lingered in small ways, the faint indent on the couch, the extra toothbrush I hadn't thrown away yet, the muscle memory of glancing toward the door at 7 p.m. Camila called it the phantom limb of marriage. She said it fades faster when you have a mission. And I did. The email chain had spread farther than I expected. Whispers about Athena Coin reached the SEC. Reporters began asking questions. Helix One's board quietly offered me a consulting contract to rebuild their culture, they said. I knew what they really meant. Help us clean the blood off the marble. Noah delivered the final update one rainy morning in February. Miles Benton's shell company changed names again, he said. Orpheus Labs, registered in Boise. Looks like the same pattern, fake investors, missing funds. He paused. You want me to forward it? I looked at the skyline, the fog curling around the cranes. No, I said slowly, not yet. Let it breathe. Revenge, I'd learned, wasn't about speed. It was about precision. That night, a new email appeared in my inbox. No sender, no signature. Just one line. Athena Coin was only the first layer. Orpheus is where the bodies are buried. Attached was a file name I recognized. Fairmont, 19 sec. Audio, MP3. The same recording that started everything but longer, a full minute this time, with someone whispering after the laughter stopped. I didn't open it. Not yet. I poured a glass of wine, turned the key in my new lock, and smiled. Some doors stay closed for protection. Others wait for the right time to open again. If you've ever rebuilt yourself after someone tried to break you, hit that like button right now. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you've ever realized that freedom sometimes starts with changing the locks. Ethan thought he was ending a marriage. He didn't know he was creating a movement. This story isn't over. There are still secrets buried under Orpheus Labs, and trust me, you'll want to be here when they surface. Subscribe, because revenge may cool slowly. But justice? Justice never sleeps.